Good morning, everyone. This is Rayce Robinson, your favorite Florida mortgage broker,
and I am Jenelle Ferrer with Waypoint Group and EXP Realty.
And we talked about the last week or so getting together and discussing some of these NAR changes, and you and I were just saying, I'm kind of glad that we waited and didn't jump out like everyone else trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Especially because we've kind of been able to hear all these different perspectives over the last week, which has been good.
Yeah, and I specifically wanted to do this with you. I spent the entire week calling real estate agents, from agents with huge buyer teams to new agents, and getting their perspective. But we're in the same market. You've been doing it for a while. You work buyers, you work sellers, you do recruiting. You've owned a small independent real estate company. Now you're kind of under the EXP banner. So you've kind of done it all, really.
Yeah.
So I want to get your take on some of these things, on the buyers and NAR and all this. And I did take some notes. So I always like to start with a quote. Jim Rohn says, "Your income is in direct correlation to the value delivered to the marketplace." And I think that's going to be big time true going forward.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that for sure.
All right, so a couple things to get out of the way. We are not going to go too into, I'm sure if you're a real estate agent, which I'm assuming you are, good chance if you're watching this, you've probably watched lots of video and other people talking about this. So some agreements that I think you'd have, and we haven't actually talked before this too much. So,
but I think we're pretty aligned.
Yeah, so we're pretty aligned. Maybe we won't agree on everything, but
sure.
We both agree that it's a terrible solution when you look at the lens of buyers and sellers getting good representation.
Yes.
We probably both agree that this is not the death of real estate agents or buyers agents. And that there's no way that we know how this is all going to play out.
Correct.
And
that's probably the thing we're surest about.
And the fact that we do know is, I don't really look at it as good or bad anymore. The train's already left the station.
Absolutely.
So it's more about what do we need to do and what do we need to do now? Because I think a lot of people are looking high level, which is great, but they're forgetting what they need to do right now.
Yeah.
And there probably are some things that we want to look at doing right now.
Absolutely. And I think it's unfortunate this happened as a result of a lawsuit, but I think there's been things that this is going to bring that are fantastic, that I think are really going to be great, that we should have considered over 100 years ago when we first started the launch of real estate.
100%.
The biggest problem now is that we have to re-educate 100 years of thinking in one direction to now shifting, and doing business a different way. It's not bad, it's just different, and I hate that it took a lawsuit to get to where we're going to be.
Yeah, and change always happens, so that's
we have to adapt. This is an ever-changing industry.
So I do want to cover I think there's a lot of misconceptions. So you tell me if you agree with this. This is what I think that we know remember, this hasn't been technically signed by the DOJ yet.
Correct.
So
there's a whole lot of narrative out there that I absolutely disagree with from the media, but continue.
Right. So you tell me if you agree with this.
Sure.
So one, that if you are a member of NAR, regardless of what company you work for, you are covered by this lawsuit. You cannot be personally sued as a result.
Correct. We cannot be personally, but NAR is. Correct.
There's no longer a requirement to be a member of the association to receive compensation. The brokers cannot require that anymore.
Correct.
Two, there will be no offer or buyer broker compensation in the MLS. That's probably the big one everyone knows about as of middle of July. This hasn't went into effect yet. I got this one directly from Tom Ferry, who's a big trader in the real estate world.
Yeah.
So he said, you can't create a non-MLS mechanism, a portal, social group, etc., for the purpose of making compensation offers to buyers or brokers, meaning they're trying to get away from the collusion of the seller has to pay a certain commission. Their take was that you can put it on your personal website as the compensation that a seller is willing to offer a buyer's agent, but it can't be in any type of national site. That was their stance. Do you agree or disagree with that?
No, I think it should be done with. I think it's done. I think it should be blanket across the board, because then what it's going to do, it's going to create confusion. Because that's not always going to be the case.
Do you think agents will, let's say the sellers agreed to pay a certain comp, would that be on your website, do you think, or would you?
No, that's up to the buyer's agent to negotiate.
So that is one potential change. They kind of want what you said, which is there to be a negotiation as far as what the seller's willing to do. Now, with that being said, the buyer, the buyer's broker may not state services as free unless there's actually no compensation anywhere. Because buyer's agents in the past said, well, my compensation.
And I've hated that. Yeah. And I've said for years, people need to stop saying that, because this lawsuit started in 2019. And it's never been free. If you charge a transaction fee, that's already not free.
True.
So the fact that buyer's agents would say and broadcast this on Instagram Reels and TikToks and all of it, I'm like, stop being a fool, because this is going to shift and change. And now we're going to have to re-educate the masses, because we're not always going to be like this. And someone is paying. It's either wrapped up into the mortgage because the seller,
Correct.
That's part of the purchase price. So they were still paying it in a loan.
Yeah, 100%.
It just wasn't clear. It wasn't as obvious, but now it's just shifting the way it looks on the closing statement. That's literally the difference.
Okay. And so, but I believe a lot of buyers agents in the past were guilty of saying, "Hey, my commission's paid." So they don't want that anymore.
And that's a no. Yeah, you can't say that at all.
So two things. One, buyer broker must have a signed buyer agreement and negotiate fees prior, and the amount of comp cannot be open-ended. Has to be a specific amount or percentage.
So I like this and I don't like this. I actually love this. And realtors really, forget realtors, real estate agents that are actively working should love this. Because how many times have we been run ragged by a buyer who's used 4 different agents to show them property? And even this weekend, I had a client that I was on vacation and I said, let me get back to you when I get back. And for me, I'm at the point where I will get back to you when I get back to you. And turns out this weekend, they're like, oh, just full disclosure, because I reached out. And I said, full disclosure, we went on and we started looking at houses this weekend. And we clicked on Zillow and we got an agent to show us all these houses. And I said, absolutely no worry. And they said, but we did tell her that we were in discussion with a realtor. I said, listen, if you liked her and you wanted to work with her, please feel free to do so. Did you sign an exclusive buyer broker agency agreement? And they're like, we haven't signed with anybody. I said, well, with me, that's going to be the first order. Are you even pre-approved? They're like, no, that's a step. I would never show property without a pre-approval letter.
What, we need money?
Because, what if we anyways, all of that to say, I think those days are going to be gone, which is fantastic. I would never waste my time on someone who wasn't pre-approved. And now that I could say this is before we did this anyways, but it wasn't standard, so there would be other agents that'd be like, well, this agent's not making me sign anything, so I'd rather not commit. Well, then I can't commit to you, right? Now, it's going to be blanket, where everybody is going to have to commit to it.
Very similar to what is on the listing side.
Exactly the same thing. We're just flipping the script.
Agreed.
So I think it protects us agents from running with a bunch of people that are not qualified, that are basically betraying us. They're going behind our back and we're wasting time that we could be with our family, showing properties to someone who's, going to double back and go with another agent and sign. I think this is going to eliminate a lot of procuring cause issues as well.
Explain that, why?
Because a lot of times buyers would go see a property with one agent and then say, oh, but I do have an agent, and then go submit that house with another one. Who gets the commission? The one who showed or the one who wrote the contract? These are constantly in litigation, or they're in the grievance. They're in some capacity, they're constantly being fought over. This is going to eliminate that with whoever has the buyer agency broker agreement.
Because they're already under contract.
Because they're already under contract. Right. And that's literally the number one issue, is that the procuring cause are like, well, who had the contract?
Yeah, and then you can give your full energy and effort into that buyer.
Absolutely.
So I think
it shows commitment.
That part is definitely a win-win.
That's my favorite part of this whole thing, honestly.
And then I want to get into the buyer's consultation because I think that's important.
Sure.
But sellers' concessions for buyer's closing costs can be included to pay buyer's agent compensation. Meaning, if you get them to pay closing costs, even though you can't advertise the compensation that the seller will pay, you can use seller paid concessions to offset the cost for whatever the buyer's agent costs.
And I think that's something that agents have misunderstood when they're not trained properly. A contract is between a buyer and a seller. It is not between a listing agent and a buyer's agent.
That's true.
And that's the thing, is that a commission should never, ever, ever be on that contract. And a lender will, kick it back and be like, get that off if someone does put that on there. It should never be on there. That's not what the contract is for. It's for the purchase of a house. So there's actual verbiage that you can use that we've used for years that goes into the additional terms that says seller to buyer to request X amount of concessions, and then in parentheses, title fees, agency fees, buyer agency fees. It's all in there.
Right.
And then that, with your buyer agency agreement, is what gets sent to the lender and title to show where that money gets dispersed to.
Correct. And just hearing you talk about it shows me the difference when we get into kind of what you need to be doing now. Buyer's agents are going to have to up their game, right, and 100%. Understand all of these different situations and how to handle them, and the contract. And really in the past, I think listing agents have really done a lot more training because it is a little more of a sales presentation.
Absolutely.
And I think buyer's agents are headed that direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We literally have to do a buyer presentation. We've always done the consultations, and you know that. And it's going to, now, like you said, the close. But if you look at our buyer agreement, it already stipulates what our commission is. And then we will try to get it from concession, but anything else is the buyer's responsibility. Enforcing it is a different thing, but now it will be enforced.
Yes. That's the other thing I think will make it easy on the buyer's consultation is it'll become the norm. So on a listing agent agreement, they're expecting to sign an agreement to sell their house.
Correct.
On the buyer's agent, it hasn't been a norm. And so
Correct.
now you won't be the only
Re-education.
agent trying to get them to do that.
Yes.
Because it's required.
Exactly.
So
that's the biggest benefit I see from this. Now we can talk about the negatives, which is all on the lending side. How are we going to help veterans?
yeah, that's a big one. I think I'm hoping they change that, those laws, but
They have to, and it's got to come from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. It's got to come from the Veterans Administration. It's got to come from the lending side, because we've got to put the FHA buyers. We know they hardly have money for a down payment, let alone closing costs, and now a buyer agency fee.
Yeah. So there's a big call to action on that I've seen. I'm really
100%.
hoping that works itself out.
And soon.
And again, those are one of those things, you could call your congressman or whatever, but we probably can't do much about that.
Not right
you
now.
and I are the regular agents.
Absolutely.
So let's go into, just one last high level question is, I've called agents all week and I've gotten all kinds of different responses.
Sure.
Some from, it's not a big deal. All it's changed is you can't put the comp in the MLS, to other agents saying that it's the death of the real estate, right? I've heard both sides.
I love those complete
agents
paradigms.
panicking to, oh my God, what do I do? To other agents. And I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I think this is a structural change, but give me your thoughts on, is this a big change? Is it not a big deal? And how much will realtors have to do to adapt?
This is a disruptor to our industry.
I like that word.
And tech has seen it. Every industry has seen this. There's going to be a lot more AI. I'm going to tell you right now, we're even working on real estate tech AI stuff that is going to help automate a lot of this stuff. I think that you're going to see a lot of buyers agents, and wisely so. When I was deciding to go to law school last year, because I wanted to up the ante, because I felt that there was a lack of respect for agents in the industry.
Yeah.
I feel like, wow, this is going to actually take the place where now I don't have to go to law school. I can do this right here with these contracts. But what it does is you're going to weed out a lot of agents that have been doing this part-time. The average agent, do you know how many homes they sell?
Two.
Oh, that is the average. So from some really great podcasts from non-realtors, I heard that it's going to take out about a third.
I've heard that number
realtors,
too.
Which is great. They're not doing anything, and they annoy the heck out of listing agents because they don't even know how to fill out contracts.
Yes.
So it's going to be.
Very
I
familiar.
think that this disruption is needed. I think we need to weed out. I honestly think the educational level and requirements need to be increased drastically for entrance into this industry. Think about it. AC, electricians, they all have to have about a year that they are apprentice, to someone, a master or whatever it is, someone who has been not in real estate. You take your course and then, oh, by the way, you're done. You passed your test. Now go write a contract. They've never seen a contract in their lives. That's never talked about in class.
And that's something you do really good. You mentor agents.
Absolutely.
I've seen that. But you almost need, in the mortgage business, real estate business, that getting your license doesn't do any of that.
It does nothing, but that's what people think, or they think it's a quick buck.
Yeah.
Which, being in the industry over 15 years, I know full well this is not a quick buck. This is a career. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes a lot of work. So I think that it's going to weed out a lot of that, but it's a huge disruptor. This is not the death of it. It's the adapt. It's time to adapt. It's the Blockbuster to Netflix shift. We're not going to a store to get VHSs or even Netflix has adapted. Now we're watching commercials. I feel like we're right back to cable. That we have broken down into different subscriptions, right?
I just paid on Amazon to get rid of the commercials again.
You see, I was like, it's like we're going full circle, but it's a disruptor, and I think it's great. I don't think it's nothing. I think someone who thinks, oh, it's nothing, they're going to be serious. We were on a call. I did a buyer presentation, and for all of my agents, so they can see what this looks like, because we've been doing this, and it looks like a listing presentation. It's just on the flip side. And the great thing is that you don't waste your time. If they don't commit to you, you shouldn't be taking down criteria. You shouldn't be driving people around. And if they don't have a pre-approval, you shouldn't do that. Most agents don't know that. They're so desperate and happy for a lead that they take them in a car and go. And no, that's not it. There has to be, loyalty. I think a lot of that is coming to the surface. And I think if you wait, there were agents that, I just got a listing agreement and my seller didn't. I said, if you wait till June or July to do this, you're missing the boat. Because I just had one last week where the seller said, hey, just so you know, I've been watching the news and I'm going to talk about the compensation with you. I said, fantastic. So our conversation, and we are in March, our conversation was
100 days away
I want to sell and they want to buy. So guess what? They don't want to compensate the buyer's agent, but they want to compensate me. So I'm putting 0. And I said, so guess what you're doing on the buyer's side? And they're like, well, it's fair. So they are signing an agreement and they are paying that with me, but they are not offering any compensation.
And that will happen, right? There are going to be
It's already happening, and so that's what I'm saying. I'm like, why would you wait till July? Consumers aren't stupid. Maybe there's some that trust you implicitly. They're like, they'll just sign away, and we're still going to get those. There's others that are like, why should I pick you? Now, these are loyal clients of mine. They're past clients. They're coming back, but they're like, Jenelle, we want to give you what's rightfully yours, but we've been watching them. We don't have to. I said, you never had to. They could $1 was really all we had to compensate.
Right. It was always negotiable.
It was always negotiable. That's what this lawsuit infuriates me. They make it look like we all said, no, it had to be. No, we have our fee the same way an attorney has their fee, but not all attorneys have the exact same fee.
True.
So those are the nuances in this whole thing that really get to me. It's the assertion that all realtors have done this and that all of us have manipulated commissions and have said, no, not all of us. Right? And if that happened, I'm sure it did at one point in history, maybe in the 80s and 90s, but you're throwing this at us now.
Right.
I feel like they dug up the last 4 decades of real estate. So I think that was a little off.
Well, no, and those are great points. So that kind of dovetails into kind of what we can be doing now, meaning us. I'm in the industry. We're both in the, it really affects everyone.
Absolutely.
And so I was thinking about this the other day. I think people are asking themselves the wrong questions. So they're asking themselves, is my compensation going to change? Am I going to make less money? How much things are going to change? And the reality is you and I can, as a game, kind of talk about it, but we don't really know. They really should be asking themselves, what do I need to be doing right now to succeed? And in 2010, I went through the Frank Dodd, remember those days? And for me, I really had a rough time during the Great Recession. Then I went through the Frank Dodd. They changed all the compensation. You couldn't make as much as a loan officer. They added so much red tape. And I remember I had a coach at the time, and I was halfway in, halfway out of the business at that point. I'd really kind of reset my life after 2008. And one of the things that he said that made a big difference to me is he said, Rayce, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers.
Right.
The real question is what are you going to do to make sure you're on the winning side? And that's a more powerful conversation that I think people aren't having. They're more worried about the high level stuff.
Absolutely.
And really the EXPs, the Keller Williams, the Remaxes, all the big companies of the world are going to figure out the agreements and the marketplace. If compensation goes down, that could be offset a lot by a lot of agents being out of the business.
Right.
Now you have buyers under contract. So it's really no way to know exactly how it's going to play out.
Sure.
So what do you think right now, if you're a real estate agent and say you've been in for a little while and you've got this big change, what would you be focusing on right now where you're saying, okay, here's the things I should be doing right now?
So great point. And we're actually doing it today with my team.
Okay.
But we're creating a tier structure for buyers and what that looks like. But there's still a lot of conversation to be had because we need to make sure they can't even afford it. And would we take on a client that can't afford us?
That's a great.
The same way an attorney is not going to take on a client that can't afford it. Now, we don't do pro bono. Attorneys do.
Right.
So that's a whole different ballgame, but we don't work for free. So I think that it's really going to first of all, you need to understand your value as an agent. And so we already have our listed value set. So we know what we bring to the table versus other agents. We know what we bring to the table versus representing yourself as a buyer. And I think that's the very scary thing is that this is going to entice buyers to, hey, well, I'll just go to the seller and get a better deal.
Right.
But it's already been shown that FSBOs have the highest rates, for sale by owners, have the highest rate of lawsuits because there's a lack of disclosure. The contract is usually written by the seller and the buyer fills it out and reviews it, but they're not attorneys and they're typically not giving it to their attorneys because for that they pay an agent who already has the contracts and we know that.
And that's why they're for sale by owner. They're trying to save all the money.
They're trying to save all the money and it usually bites them in the butt later, right? So we're going to see that if buyers choose to represent themselves without knowing real estate, I already see, doe in the deer kind of thing where it's when people are like, oh my gosh, there's a lot. I'm like, but we walk you through it. That's the point of having a realtor on your side. Well, them understanding our value, then the compensation structure. I'm going to set my compensation. It's not going to be what everybody else has. And that's okay. That's the point of this. This is free enterprise, and if it's a no, it's a no. And that's okay. I know I'm not going to be able to work with every buyer that comes to me because they either won't be able to afford me or it's just not going to work out because the lending side, they just don't have the funds to be able to do it, or it's just not a good fit. And that's okay. This is our business. We are independent contractors.
You're representing a buyer.
We're representing a buyer, and this is our business. You can choose not to work with somebody if you choose not to.
Absolutely.
Right? But what's happened with realtors is just this desperation. Oh, you're buying? I want to help. You know, it's like, okay, do you know what you're getting into? Have you discussed the terms? Have you, you know, because this may be a bigger headache than you want to take on. And I think we're going to start reassessing our businesses and be more professional about it instead of desperate hyenas trying to get everything that comes our way, you know, and be like, let's be intentional about the client and what's going on, and speaking with lending to see what can we really do. At this point, we can only help veterans if we're being compensated. But what does that look like? Because if we're already with the client that's a VA, you know, some houses do, but what if they like the one house that has no compensation?
Exactly.
That's the challenge right now.
And I think those are some of the things that will play out.
And those, I mean, they say this is going to take between 12 and 18 months for the dust to settle for us to really see, you know, what best practices look like. But right now, we need to create our best practices. This is where you really start seeing, you know, the cream of the crop rise up. You really do. This is where agents that are in it to win it, that are full to, like you said, the winners and the losers, this is the ones that want it. You start adapting again. Okay, what does this look like? And people will refer you if you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about.
All right, so those are really good points. So let's go into just quick the buyer's consultation, because
Sure.
I think there are some agents, or a lot of agents think they do a buyer's consultation. But for me, the difference is, one, now it has to end with them signing a contract.
Absolutely.
Where before you didn't really have to get a lot of agreement. It was more about building rapport.
Sure.
Right? And then two, you actually have to have that sign to be able to go show a buyer even a house. Is that correct? Other than maybe meeting them out there a couple.
Even to show them a house.
Now you can do open houses, correct?
You can do open houses, and these are the little nuances that we still need to figure out. But the open house is different. But now if they don't have representation and they want you, you're not representing them. So that's the thing. I mean, we're a transaction broker, but I really think we're going to have to consider a lot of these brokerages that have make us go to transaction broker.
Sure.
We need to go into single agency for our buyers, because they're going to expect loyalty.
Yeah.
And so that's something that most agents don't understand, or they practice single agency where they're transaction brokers and they're confusing it. And then I think the dual agency is going to be an issue if sellers are trying to, or if a listing agent's trying to double. So we just have to be very mindful of how this plays out, and making sure that we understand these lines very distinctly. But we do need that signed, the buyer presentation. Did you have a question about that, or do you want me to go through it?
So I think agents, like for instance, I'm a lender. It's very common for people to call me and say, "What's your rate?" Right? Which on the internet, there's 5 million different ways, and so we have to have this whole conversation and talk to buyers, credit score programs, and all these things. I think, and when I was newer, I struggled with that, and I went away and I actually wrote for an entire week how to handle that conversation. And so I think buyers agents aren't used to handling the conversation. How are we compensated? And so I think that buyer's consultation is basically building value.
Absolutely.
Right? And the people that can build the most value are going to be the most valuable agents, because they're representing the buyer at the best level. So any suggestions for somebody that, because I think we both agree right now we need to be working on a really, really good buyer's consultation.
100%.
What are the key elements of that, do you think?
So the first thing is, think about a listing. It's gonna parallel. It's
Sure.
gonna be very similar. But the first thing is you talk about, introduce yourself, do all of that stuff, but you're going to talk about who you are, and then talk about what, you know, a listing agent, the selling side versus the buyer side, what that looks like in a transaction. Then you have to start talking about the value added of having an agent representing you. And from there, talk about what the process of buying a home looks like. And you're giving free education, because you're going to have them sign at the end of this. There's no mention of a contract until the end, because it's the same thing as you don't talk about commissions, you don't talk about anything up front. You go look at the home, you have conversations, etc. And then towards the end, you start talking about what this process looks like, what closing looks like, where the fees come from, you know, and then from there you start talking about all the things that you do as an agent for them. And then that's when we go into, these are the 9 things that we do for you, and these are the things that in return, here are the 6 items. And of those, one of them is the compensation. And we talk about that. But it's not this firework thing. It's just very matter of fact.
Yeah.
You know, would you agree that these are 9 things that you would need or are of value to you? Fantastic. In return, these are the 6 things. First is that you agree to get pre-approved by a qualified lender. You know, we'd love to have you work with someone that we work with, but if not, at least a reputable lender that we know we can verify. Number 2, make sure that we have different things. And then one of those is our commission is X amount, and you agree to pay that compensation. While we will try to get that through seller concessions. If not, this will be due upon closing. You know, so those are and then that will be added to the contract. You have them sign that. After they sign that, we also have a satisfaction guarantee, and we have another one, a cancellation guarantee. So you have to add things like that for value, because you have to differentiate yourself from other agents. But once they sign that, If they sign that, then you move on to, now let's talk about the fun stuff. What are you looking for in a home?
Right.
Before that, you don't care. Because if they don't commit to you, you don't care what they're looking for.
You think before people were almost doing that in reverse?
Yes, 100%. We were like, all right, so tell me about what you're looking for in a house.
Right.
No, they haven't committed to you. Talk about first what this process even looks like. Because they may not even be ready. So you're jumping the gun trying to get the criteria before they, A, are even pre-qualified or pre-approved. B, pre-qualified is a joke of a word anyways. We need pre-approvals, right? So
100%.
we need to make sure that you've seen their statements, that you know that they can buy this house. Because what are we going to get into a contract and figure out, they lied about their, no. Right? So we want them already, in the game in that aspect. And then from there, then we can determine criteria. Because a lot of that criteria is going to be revolved around how much they can qualify for.
And that's really sales, really. Think about it, on the lending side, we have to take someone that calls that says, I don't want my credit pulled, right?
Exactly.
And I just want to ask questions.
Yeah.
So really, we need to get them pre-approved.
Right.
And it's a lot of building rapport and them
Absolutely.
trusting you. And there's a lot of sales skills that have to get developed to do that.
Yes.
So would you say one of the top things you should be doing right now, because I can tell yours is pretty much done, but you're still tweaking some of the things.
Now, yeah.
But you need to be practicing and building a really strong buyer consultation that you can repeat over and over and over.
Absolutely. In your sleep. Like, I have this actually as a keynote, but I rarely need to go to the keynote. I already know how to have this discussion, so I can use this, but we're talking about what this looks like. And so it's there, and it's also printed out for them. So I give it to them in a packet. If they're not ready to sign and commit to you, why on earth would you commit to them and waste time, gas, money, energy? And you know why this is also great? We were already going to be setting retainers in place. Sick of driving around everywhere.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, no, I changed my mind, or I'm not, okay, but I just wasted time with my family, events that I should have been at. Instead, I said yes to this buyer, to go show houses. And at the same time, wasting gas all over just to show them. I hate looking at houses. Maybe I'm one of the few agents. I do not like looking at houses. So when people say you're a door opener, false.
Right.
I do not like opening doors. I love negotiating, I love contracts, and I love training clients on how to make this the largest purchase of their life.
Yeah, and we're helping facilitate the process,
Absolutely.
not 100%. So, all right, so fun here. We'll kind of do this, and then we'll wrap up. I'm going to call this the lightning round.
All right, let's go.
So give me your quick thoughts. So we're going to do winners and losers and why.
Okay.
Sellers.
Winners.
Why?
Paying less commission.
Listing agents.
Winners.
Why?
Because they get more sales. They're
And
gonna
nothing
have
really changed.
More opportunity for listings because people are paying less.
All right, tougher one. Buyers agents.
Struggle. I don't want to call them the losers. I'm not going to call anybody. I think the buyers are the losers, which is the next one.
Yeah.
The buyers agents can be the struggle because we have to wait to see what lending does. But
yeah, and on the buyer's agent, just my part, as a loan officer, I always say focus on your daily success plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so buyer's agents are going to have to a lot of times I talk to buyer's agents, I'm like, is there a couple hours every day where you sit and ask yourself, how am I going to get more business? And in the past, I think they've really relied on, hey, there's already this commission out there.
Yeah.
Let me write the contract. And and I've even seen agents, this was their presentation, and I'll kick you back a little bit. And that was
they
their,
can do that now.
I
love it. So I'm going to say winners because it's going to refine the winners from
Yeah.
the losers. So let's say
I think you're going to get rid of the people that
Yes.
are the bad actors.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's not that they did anything wrong. It's just the way the industry was set up.
correct.
I think it's just going to reward people now that are ready to get to work.
So let's call the buyers agents winners
Okay.
because the winners are going to
I like that
survive this.
reframe.
Yeah.
Now I think we're both going to agree on this one.
They're the losers.
Buyers.
They're the losers in this.
And I would say specifically probably first-time home buyers?
First-time home buyers and veterans right now.
Yeah. I really think the veteran things get worked out. I can't see the VA just letting them.
They better do it quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think FHA, first-time home buyers, the ones that are already struggling for funds to begin with,
And they need the most representation.
and they need the most. That's where I think the biggest losers are, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we'll see how this all plays out. Again, we don't know for sure. This is just kind of our thoughts, but
Sure.
we're both here in the market, do a lot of agents, a
Absolutely.
lot of clients,
Yeah.
a lot of people. And a lot of people panic. I think the panic comes from people not having direction, right? Because they're not sure, that uncertainty.
Absolutely.
And I think on the big structural things, a lot of the big companies, the EXPs, they're going to figure some of that out. But we
Yeah.
still got to get to work right now.
Right now, yeah.
And so, all right. So final thought from both of us. I'll give you the last word. I'll give you my final thought, which is, if you look at the numbers, rates are on their way down. No one predicting rates to be higher. The Fed just met. There's not anyone on the Fed right now predicting rates to be higher. We just went over 4 million transactions again. We're likely to be over 6 to 7 million over the next few years. You know, at the same time, you know, there's more programs as far as on the lending side to help buyers. And really, I think there's more of a tailwind going forward for the next few years. So for the agents, they work a plan and figure these things out, there's going to be a big reward.
Yeah, agree. I think that there's a lot more buyers out there that are ready. I think that they're also getting educated on what's going on, and some are preparing themselves. I think that as agents, it's time for us to buckle up and enjoy the ride and be prepared. I think you got to get in the right room. I think you got to be with people who are all elevating one another and encouraging each other, and not being scared, you know, with the tail between your legs. I think this is not a surprise. This hasn't been a surprise. So if it's catching you by surprise, you need to shift rooms. That's my biggest thing for agents, you know, because there's a lot of good stuff that's coming.
Yeah, so there's a lot to play out, but I wanted to do this, and maybe we'll do another one as kind of we get closer. Yeah, see, we made a couple predictions. We'll see what happens. So anyway, so yeah, just everyone stay there, stay working, stay in the game. Like I said, be one of the winners, figure out what plan you're working, and really it just comes down to right now getting to work every day.
Absolutely. Show up.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks a lot for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
All right, see you guys later.
Bye.